I've always believed that when you meet your person, you just know. There's a certain way the air shifts, how your heart beats differently, and how conversations flow so effortlessly that you forget the rest of the world exists. That's exactly what I felt the first night I met Daniel. He wasn't someone I was looking for, honestly. Dating wasn't even on my radar at the time. I had just moved into a new apartment with my roommate, Alyssa, and was focusing on my job and settling into the city. Alyssa was the kind of girl who made friends instantly. She was outgoing, funny, and had this magnetic energy that drew people in. I admired it because I was more on the reserved side. The night I met Daniel was completely unplanned. Alyssa had invited a group of friends over for drinks, and I almost skipped it because I was tired from work. But she insisted I come hang out, saying I needed to have a life outside spreadsheets. When I walked into the living room, Daniel was there, sitting on the couch with a beer in his hand. He looked up when I entered, and it was like the air shifted for me in that moment. He smiled, one of those slow, genuine smiles that reached the eyes, and introduced himself. From that point on, the rest of the night was a blur of laughter and conversation. Somehow, we ended up in the kitchen together, away from the noise of the others, talking about everything from our favorite books to childhood dreams. He was attentive, really listening to what I said, and he shared things about himself in a way that felt real, not like he was trying to impress me. At one point, he said, "It's rare to meet someone who just gets it," and I felt this rush of warmth in my chest. I didn't realize how much I'd been craving that kind of connection until it was right in front of me. By the end of the night, I was certain I had just met someone who could be important in my life. But here's the part one didn't expect. As we were all saying goodbye, Alyssa leaned over and whispered to me that Daniel had asked for her number earlier. My smile faltered for a second, but I played it cool. Maybe I had misread the whole vibe between us. Maybe he was just friendly with everyone. I told myself it didn't matter, after all, I had just met him. Over the next few weeks, Daniel started coming around more often. Alyssa told me they were hanging out, but she made it sound casual. Still, every time he was over, I felt that same pull toward him. He would always find a way to talk to me, whether it was in the kitchen while Alyssa was getting ready, or in the hallway when he was leaving. And the way he looked at me, it was hard to ignore. One evening, Alyssa had to run out to grab something before a movie night we had planned, so it was just me and Daniel in the apartment. We ended up on the couch, talking again. At some point, there was a pause, and he said softly, "You know, you're one of the most genuine people I've ever met. I feel like you're my soulmate." My brain short-circuited. Soulmate? I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. I managed to ask, "Aren't you dating Alyssa?" He shrugged and said, "Yeah, but it's complicated. What we have is different." I've never felt this way about anyone before. My stomach twisted into knots. On one hand, my heart was racing because hearing him say that felt like everything I'd been secretly hoping for since we met. On the other hand, he was literally seeing my roommate. Before I could even respond, Alyssa walked in, all smiles, completely unaware of the conversation she'd just interrupted. That night, I couldn't sleep. His words replayed in my head over and over: soulmate, different, never felt this way before. I didn't know if I should believe him or if I was just setting myself up for heartbreak. But one thing was certain, things were about to get complicated. After that night, I started noticing every little thing Daniel did when he was around me. The way his eyes lingered on me just a second too long, how he'd ask questions about my day even when Alyssa was mid-conversation, how his jokes seemed designed to make me laugh specifically. It was subtle enough that Alyssa didn't pick up on it, but obvious enough that I couldn't ignore it. I tried telling myself it was harmless, that I was imagining things. But then the messages started. It began innocently. Daniel sent me a meme one afternoon with a "This reminded me of you" caption. I laughed and replied. Then he asked me about a project I'd mentioned at work. From there, the texts became a regular thing. Sometimes they were casual, but other times they veered into more personal territory, like late-night conversations about dreams, fears, and the kind of love we both wanted in life. He never explicitly said anything romantic, but the undercurrent was there. I felt guilty, but I didn't stop. Part of me was convinced we had some undeniable connection, like maybe fate had thrown us together in this weird, messy way. But another part of me knew I was treading on dangerous ground. Alyssa started talking more openly about her thing with Daniel, saying it wasn't serious but she liked having him around. She didn't gush about him the way most people do when they're falling for someone. It was more like she enjoyed the attention. That made me feel justified, somehow, like I wasn't really betraying her because she wasn't truly invested. Still, I kept my guard up around them. I didn't want to be the villain in my own life. Then came the night everything shifted again. Alyssa had gone out with friends, and I was home alone, curled up on the couch with a book. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, Daniel was standing there, holding a bag of takeout. "I figured you hadn't eaten," he said with that disarming smile. "Hope you like Thai." I should have told him to leave, but instead I stepped aside and let him in. We ate together, talked for hours, and by the time midnight rolled around, we were sitting so close our knees were touching. The air between us was thick with something unspoken. He looked at me, his voice low, and said, "I don't know how much longer I can pretend like I don't feel this." My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Daniel," I whispered, "this is wrong." He shook his head. "What's wrong is not being with the person you're meant to be with." I didn't know if he meant it or if he was just saying what he thought I wanted to hear, but in that moment, I wanted to believe him more than anything. We didn't kiss that night. He left after a lingering hug that felt like it lasted a lifetime. But my mind was already spinning. The next day, I couldn't look at Alyssa the same way. Every time she mentioned Daniel, I felt like I was carrying this huge secret. It was like there was an invisible line between us now, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep from crossing it. The tension between me and Daniel only grew in the weeks that followed. It was like every time he came over, the universe was playing a cruel joke on me, putting him in my space, making it impossible to forget what he'd said that night. Alyssa still didn't seem deeply invested, but they were officially dating now. She'd introduce him to friends as her boyfriend, and I'd stand there, smiling tightly, pretending I wasn't dying inside. One Saturday, Alyssa had to go visit her parents for the weekend, and she casually mentioned that Daniel might still come by because they had planned a movie night. "If he does, just tell him we'll reschedule," she said, tossing her bag over her shoulder before leaving. I didn't think much of it, until there was a knock at my door that evening. It was Daniel. "She didn't tell you?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. "She went home for the weekend." He grinned like that was the answer he'd been hoping for. "Guess it's just us, then." Part of me wanted to shut the door and not let him in, but I stepped aside anyway. We ordered pizza, watched some random Netflix movie, and talked for hours. Somewhere between the second slice of pizza and the credits rolling, Daniel shifted closer, his arm brushing mine. My pulse was racing, my brain screaming at me to keep my distance, but my body wasn't listening. Then he said it again, those words that haunted me since the first time I heard them, "You're my soulmate." I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I froze. This time, I didn't even try to deflect. "You're with Alyssa," I reminded him. He shook his head. "I'm not with her the way I'm with you. With her, it's just surface. With you, it's real." I hated how much I wanted to believe that. But I also knew that if Alyssa ever found out, it would destroy our friendship, and probably me along with it. We didn't kiss, not yet, but he took my hand and held it for the rest of the night. I didn't pull away. That became our pattern. Whenever Alyssa was distracted or busy, Daniel would find a way to be around me. We'd text late at night, share inside jokes, and talk about things I'd never told anyone else. I told myself I was just waiting for him to end things with Alyssa, that we were in this weird in-between space. But deep down, I knew I was letting myself get tangled in something I couldn't control. The real breaking point came one night when Alyssa was hosting a small get-together at our place. Daniel arrived, and instead of sticking by her side, he kept gravitating toward me. I caught him watching me from across the room, and the heat in his gaze was impossible to ignore. Later, when I slipped into the kitchen to grab more drinks, he followed me. No words, just the quiet hum of the fridge and the faint laughter from the living room. Then, he leaned in, close enough that I could feel his breath on my ear, and whispered, "I can't stop thinking about you." My hands tightened around the drinks I was holding. I wanted to tell him to stop, to push him away, but instead I stood there frozen, my heart pounding. It was the first time I realized just how deep in this I really was, and how close I was to crossing a line I wouldn't be able to uncross. After that whisper in the kitchen, I couldn't think straight. Every look Daniel gave me felt heavier, loaded with something we were both too afraid, or too reckless, to name out loud. Alyssa was still blissfully unaware, but I was starting to crack under the weight of the secret. The next week, Alyssa invited me to go out with her and Daniel to a rooftop bar. I almost said no, but she begged me to come, saying it would be fun, just the three of us. The idea of being the third wheel made my stomach churn, but I agreed. That night, I put on my best dress, telling myself it was just for me, but deep down, I knew I was hoping Daniel would notice. And he did. The way his eyes lingered when I walked up to meet them made it clear. Alyssa, on the other hand, was in high spirits, ordering cocktails and laughing at every little thing. We sat at a small table, the city lights glowing around us, and somehow, Daniel managed to keep starting conversations with me instead of her. At one point, Alyssa went to the bathroom, and the second she was out of sight, Daniel leaned in and said, "I wish it was just you here with me tonight." My breath caught in my throat. "Daniel," I hissed, "this isn't fair to her." He smirked. "What's not fair is that I can't be with the person I actually want." Before I could respond, Alyssa returned, sliding back into her seat with no idea what had just been said. The rest of the night was torture, pretending everything was normal. A few days later, it finally happened, we crossed the line. Alyssa had gone out with friends, and Daniel texted me, saying he needed to talk. He came over, pacing my living room before blurting out, "I can't do this anymore. I'm ending things with Alyssa." My heart leapt, but before I could even process it, he stepped closer, his hands finding my face, and kissed me. It was the kind of kiss that makes your knees weak, the kind that makes you forget every reason why it's wrong. We didn't go further that night, but the damage was done. From then on, we were no longer just skirting the edge, we were fully over it. Daniel promised me that he'd break up with Alyssa soon, but days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. Meanwhile, we were sneaking moments whenever we could, when Alyssa was in the shower, when she stepped out to take a call, even when she left the room for a minute. I told myself it was temporary, that we were just waiting for the right moment. But in the back of my mind, a tiny voice kept whispering that if he could do this to her, he could do it to me too. The moment everything imploded came out of nowhere. One Saturday afternoon, I was in my room when I heard voices in the living room. Alyssa sounded upset. I stepped out to find her standing with her arms crossed, staring at Daniel. "Is there something you need to tell me?" she asked him. My stomach dropped. He froze, glancing at me for just a second, too long. That was all it took for her to see the truth in his eyes. Her face went pale, then hardened. "Oh my God," she whispered, looking between us. "It's you. It's been you this whole time." The silence after Alyssa's words felt like it could shatter glass. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Daniel stepped forward, starting to say, "Alyssa, it's not what you think," but she cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Oh, really? Because what I think is that my so-called friend has been sneaking around with my boyfriend behind my back. And judging by the way you just looked at each other, I'm right." My chest tightened. "Alyssa, please, let me explain," I said, my voice trembling. She turned on me, eyes blazing. "Explain what?" "How you decided my relationship didn't matter. How you smiled in my face while you were going behind my back. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" Daniel tried to step between us, saying, I was going to end things, but she shoved his hand away. "Save it, Daniel. You've been saying that for weeks, haven't you?" He froze, and I knew she'd hit the truth. Alyssa's gaze shifted back to me, and for a split second, I saw the hurt behind her anger. "You were supposed to be my friend," she whispered. "And you knew. You knew he was mine." I felt tears burn in my eyes. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did," she snapped. "Because you let it." Her words sliced through me. Daniel muttered something about giving us space and left, but the damage was already irreparable. The second the door closed, Alyssa turned away from me, grabbing her phone and keys. "I can't even look at you right now. You need to figure out your living situation because I'm not staying here with you." And then she was gone. I stood there in the middle of the living room, my hands shaking, realizing I'd lost not just a friend, but possibly my own self-respect. Daniel called me later that night, saying he finally told her the truth, and that we could be together now. But his voice sounded too calm, too detached, for someone who'd just blown up 2 relationships at once. Still, I let him come over. He held me, told me we were meant to be, and for a while, I believed him because I needed to believe that all this mess was worth something. But over the next week, reality hit hard. Alyssa moved out without another word to me, leaving her key on the kitchen counter. Our mutual friend started pulling away, and I became the girl who stole her roommate's boyfriend. Daniel didn't seem to care about the fallout. He kept talking about the future like nothing bad had happened, but cracks were starting to show. He still texted late at night when he was busy during the day, and sometimes he'd disappear for hours without explanation. That nagging voice in my head, the one I'd been ignoring, was starting to scream. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I found out exactly why he'd been disappearing. It started with a gut feeling I couldn't shake. Daniel had been busy more and more lately, canceling plans last minute or showing up hours late with vague excuses. One Friday night, he told me he had to work late, but something in his tone didn't sit right. Out of curiosity, or maybe desperation, I checked his Instagram stories. That's when I saw it. A friend of a friend had posted a group selfie at a bar, and there he was in the background, laughing with his arm around a girl I'd never seen before. My heart dropped. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I confronted him the next day. "Who was that girl you were with last night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He barely looked up from his phone. "Just a friend." "A friend you had your arm around?" I pressed. He sighed, putting his phone down. "You're reading too much into it." The dismissive way he said it made my skin crawl. Still, I told myself maybe I was overreacting. But 2 nights later, I got the truth in the most humiliating way possible. I was out grabbing coffee when I bumped into Alyssa's friend Mariah. She gave me this pitying look and said, "I'm sorry about Daniel." My stomach turned. "What about Daniel?" She hesitated before saying, "You didn't hear? He's been seeing a girl named Claire for weeks." "I thought you knew." My mind went blank. I mumbled something and walked away, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my coffee. That night, I showed up at Daniel's place without warning. When he opened the door, I didn't even give him a chance to speak. "Who's Claire?" His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before he put on that calm mask again. "She's just someone I met, while you were with me." My voice cracked. "While you were telling me I was your soulmate?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking annoyed rather than guilty. "Look, things between us have been complicated. I didn't think we were exclusive yet." I laughed, but it came out sharp and bitter. "Not exclusive? You destroyed my friendship, made me believe you were leaving her for me, and now you're saying we weren't even official?" He shrugged like it was no big deal. That was the moment something in me snapped. I realized I'd let him manipulate me from the start, feeding me just enough sweet words to keep me hooked while he kept his options open. I walked out without another word, my chest aching but my mind clearer than it had been in months. That night, I blocked his number, deleted our messages, and sat in the quiet of my apartment, replaying every red flag I'd ignored. For the first time, I saw him for what he really was, not a soulmate, but a selfish liar who thrived on attention. The first few days after I cut Daniel off were brutal. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out all the good parts of me and left only the shame. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head: our first conversation in the kitchen, the way he called me his soulmate, the look on Alyssa's face when she realized the truth. It all played like a movie I didn't want to watch but couldn't turn off. The worst part was knowing I had been a willing participant in my own heartbreak. Yes, Daniel lied and manipulated, but I had let myself believe him because it felt good to be wanted. I had ignored the obvious, telling myself a fairy tale where we were meant to be, even though reality was screaming at me to run. Slowly, I started picking myself up. I reached out to a couple of close friends, not mutual ones, with Alyssa, and told them the truth. Some of them were blunt, saying they were disappointed in me, and honestly, I needed to hear that. Others reminded me that people make mistakes, and the important thing is learning from them. Alyssa never spoke to me again. I sent her a long message apologizing, not to win her back as a friend, but because she deserved to hear me take full responsibility. She never replied, and I accepted that some bridges can't be rebuilt. As for Daniel, he didn't stay with Claire either. I heard through the grapevine that she dumped him after finding out about me and Alyssa. It was almost poetic. He ended up alone, exactly where his actions had led him. Months later, I saw him across the street one afternoon. He gave me a small wave, like nothing had happened. I didn't wave back. I just kept walking, my head high, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. Looking back now, I know Daniel was never my soulmate. He was a lesson, a harsh, painful one, that taught me what happens when you compromise your values for someone else's attention. I learned that the kind of love worth having doesn't come with secrets, lies, or guilt. It's honest, it's kind, and it doesn't require hurting someone else to get it. If I ever hear someone call me their soulmate again, I'll know that the words mean nothing unless the actions match. And I'll remember the girl I was when I met Daniel, and make sure I never become her again.